Well, Friday we all assumed was going to be a very pivotal day in the Lane Kiffin saga. I guess we can. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic calling it that, but it's kind of what it's what it's become, and what it has been here. The Ole Miss coach has been hotly pursued by both Florida and LSU. This search is nearing its end, and Lane Kiffin is going to have to make a decision here very soon. When last we spoke, we told you that Kiffin and athletic director Keith Carter were set to meet on Friday. Well, after we got off air on Thursday, there was some definition given to that meeting to say that it was scheduled for 8:15 a.m. in Oxford. Now, Ole Miss is off this weekend. The football team does not play, as you probably know. So after they practiced on Thursday, the team was dismissed. Coaches were sent out recruiting, and Lane and Keith Carter were set to meet on Friday morning. And we discussed a day ago the particulars there. Carter wanted some clarity. Kiffin wanted a plan on how Ole Miss was going to remain competitive in the next era of NIL. If you missed any of that conversation, you can go get it on demand. We went into great detail about it. And I think my biggest takeaway throughout this entire saga is Lane Kiffin's a weird dude. I'm not being funny. I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. I mean that seriously. Like, he's a strange cat. He is wired a little differently with the way that he handles and manages things. Over the course, certainly of the last week to 10 days, as this has really accelerated, talking to plenty of people who know him, cover him, friends with him, work with him, it is very clear that he approaches things differently. We all laugh at how he trolls on social media, but I think through a lot of his actions as well, we see this. So Lane Kiffin sends his team away, his coaches out to recruit, and this meeting scheduled for 8:15 a.m. And so then he pivots and he calls a practice Friday morning. So they don't end up having that meeting at 8:15. Instead, he has his team practice on Friday morning. And that meeting was bumped back to noon. So Lane Kiffin, Keith Carter were set to meet at noon. I have not yet gotten word as to as of this very moment, as to what transpired at that meeting or if that meeting is still happening. So I would assume that at some point over the course of the show, I'll get clarity on, or at least a better sense of what happened in that meeting, provided it did happen. But we've officially entered the phase where things are just silly. Earlier today on Twitter, someone posted a flight tracker that there was a plane from Baton Rouge going to Oxford scheduled to come back to Baton Rouge. A short time after that, I had someone, let's say, associated with that airport message me a screen, like a picture, a photo of the screen of the flight, the flight. I want to say tracker, the schedule, the flight schedule at the airport for the day. And my goodness, so I started to make a call and figure out whose plane that was, what the intent was. Come to find out, it was literally someone flying from Baton Rouge to Oxford. It was an animal transport service. They were going to pick up a black lab, like a hunting dog, basically. And they, just to troll everybody, changed the course to divert to Gainesville before then flying back to Baton Rouge, just to make everybody go bonkers, which, congrats, high-level trolling, fittingly amid the Lane Kiffin saga as well. But I'll tell you this much, that there has been in the last certainly 18 to 20 hours a pivot in the way the Ole Miss side has thought about what's going on here. Because 24 hours ago, Florida people, although delusional they are in this situation, still believe they were going to get Lane Kiffin. LSU people think they're going to get Lane Kiffin. And Ole Miss people thought he was going to stay. Why would he leave? Championship team, all that sort of stuff. Got it. Playoff team, whatever. But last night, on Thursday night, after the show, within about an hour, every Ole Miss contact that I have were calling and texting me, effectively acknowledging that they felt it was over and that Lane Kiffin's coming to Baton Rouge. So some things started to settle in on Thursday night over there that made the Ole Miss folks feel like this had shifted and that Lane Kiffin was coming to Baton Rouge. Now, I'm going to give you the caveat that I always give you with coaching searches. Consider everything, believe nothing, and this is never done until it is done. Like ink dry on the contract, coach at the podium being introduced. I'll remind you that in 2016, we're all sitting there on Thanksgiving night watching LSU play Texas A&M, and on the crawl there at the bottom of ESPN during the game, Tom Herman is going to become the LSU coach. 36 hours later, Ed Ogeron's at the podium being introduced. So it is never over until it is over. And even sometimes you hire the softball coach from Alabama who's at the podium and then decides to go back to Alabama. That's the thing that happens. So I'm not going to sit here and pound the table and tell you this is done. What I will tell you is there is a very strongly growing feeling at Ole Miss that Lane Kiffin is leaving, and there has been a very firmly held feeling among the LSU circles that Lane Kiffin is coming. And if you made me guess right now, I would say that at the latest, a week from Monday, that Lane Kiffin would be the LSU coach. Now, that's subject to change. Things happen, things transpire, but the LSU Board of Supervisors had a meeting today. We know the public agenda that was listed was to handle the Brian Kelly buyout, how they're going to move forward there, but they went into executive session, so that was behind closed doors, not open to the public. I was told that also in that meeting they did discuss terms of the offer that they're giving Lane Kiffin to make sure that everyone is okay with the contract that Verge Osbury would formally present to Lane Kiffin. There's a lot of other things in particulars that I think are being discussed and included in there that we'll talk about at the appropriate time. But I believe LSU has all their ducks in a row. I believe they got their offer for Lane Kiffin. I believe at this point he feels like he will accept that contract and will be the LSU head coach. It's a matter of time, and can you actually get it to the finish line? And that is something that until it's done, it's never actually done. The other thing that I will tell you that I do think is relevant here is I think there is a sentiment, I know, there is a sentiment within Ole Miss circles that they are ready to move on. That whereas, and this makes sense, right? Because anyone involved in this type of situation would eventually reach this point. If you're in a relationship with someone and you love them and they love you back and you have a great time, a great relationship, and then they start to have a wandering eye, you may work very hard to try to get them to re-engage, to love you back. But you're going to get to a point where you say, I'm tired of you cheating on me, leave. Like, this is over. And I feel like Ole Miss collectively, they've gotten to that point. And a very sincere issue for this team is the college football playoff. Let me explain. So a day ago, we talked to you about why Ole Miss would want Lane Kiffin to coach through the Egg Bowl. They realize that if they lose the Egg Bowl and Lane Kiffin is leaving, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee can use Lane Kiffin leaving against them in their evaluation of Ole Miss for the playoff. So if they lose the Egg Bowl and Kiffin leaves, there's a real chance Ole Miss could be out of the playoff altogether. So they have a very strong desire. Obviously, it's a rivalry game and they want to win, but a very strong desire and need to win that game. And so the feeling a day ago was they want Lane Kiffin there to give them the best opportunity to win that game, even if he's going to leave afterwards. I'll tell you, I no longer believe that's the feeling, because I've had multiple conversations here today and last night where there are players on that Ole Miss football team that are very uneasy about what's transpired. I know there is unrest internally within that football team about whether or not they want Lane Kiffin to proceed through the remainder of the season with them as their head coach as he's looking at another job. And if that fracture continues this week, I think the thing that Ole Miss has to consider is, do you want Lane Kiffin to be your coach this week going into the biggest regular season game in the history of your program? And that's not hyperbole, by the way. Do you want Lane Kiffin to be the coach if it's fracturing internally, or are you better moving on now promoting Joe Judge to the interim head coach, and so then you could go play the Egg Bowl with your interim head coach, and if you win it, you could say to the committee, look, we didn't have Lane Kiffin, and we still beat Mississippi State. We won the game, put us in the playoff. So, and seed us appropriately. So I think that is something they are considering right now is, are they actually better off this week leading up to the Egg Bowl without Lane Kiffin, which was not the case a day ago. So at this point, I'll continue to say, I think Lane Kiffin wants to take the LSU job. I think he also wants to coach his team. But I think there is a growing unrest in Oxford, in Ole Miss circles, with Lane Kiffin, how this is dragged out to the point to where now it is actually detrimental to them for him to continue coaching this week through the Egg Bowl and potentially, well, I've said this for 2 weeks, they were never going to let him coach the college football playoff. That much was always abundantly clear and made clear to Lane Kiffin as well, by the way. He knows they are not going to let him coach in the college football playoff. Try as he might, they are not going to allow that, nor should they. But it feels like now the bigger question is they may not even want him coaching in the Egg Bowl a week from today. So buckle up. I think something could drop at any point throughout the show today as we continue to move through Kiffin Watch 2025. Okay, I want to talk also about, I know there were Florida rumors about, if Florida's actually involved. I know there was a report that the Florida brass met with Lane's representation yesterday. That is true. Jimmy Sexton represents Lane Kiffin. He also represents, 100 other coaches. So Florida, which has started having conversations with representation for other coaches, certainly, I'm sure they did meet with Jimmy Sexton a day ago. Phone, I'm sure they're talking every day, but it ain't about Lane Kiffin. At this point, I think Florida would be a distant long shot. Yeah, I mean, it would be, if Florida gets back in this to land Lane Kiffin, it'd be the greatest comeback since Lazarus, okay? This is very clear right now, can LSU get this over the finish line with Lane Kiffin and when? And that's what we're keeping an eye on.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.